So hello everybody. In this module we will be dealing with the pharmacotherapy of acute decompensated heart failure. Now a patient with acute decompensated heart failure will typically present to the emergency department with a variety of clinical symptoms. It is important for the attending physician to differentiate it from a list of differential diagnosis, and I will be dealing with this differential diagnosis and the clinical symptoms in the first part before moving on to the actual therapy. Now over here we have a very oversimplified diagram of the pulmonary and systemic circulation. Now if we were to analyze this, suppose there has been a infarct in the left ventricle and subsequently leading to left ventricular failure. So what will happen? The left ventricle will be unable to pump out blood to the periphery. This will lead to back pressure to the left atrium. The pressure will be transmitted to the pulmonary vasculature, and this will result in the manifestation of acute pulmonary edema. With worsening pulmonary edema, there will be pulmonary arterial hypertension, and pulmonary arterial hypertension will ultimately lead to right ventricular failure. Again, over here the back pressure will be transmitted to the right atrium, and from the right atrium that pressure will be transmitted to the periphery. But in this case, the peripheral involvement will occur at a very late stage. Usually the patient will present to the emergency department at this stage. That is where there is onset of acute pulmonary edema. And so if we were to analyze the clinical symptoms in such a scenario, there will be sudden onset dyspnea at rest, there will be orthopnea and prostration, and if we were to auscultate, we might find basal crepitations as well. Now let's suppose there has been a right ventricular infarct leading to a right ventricular failure. Over here the symptoms of pulmonary edema will not appear. Instead, due to back pressure on the right atrium, there will be an elevated jugular venous pressure, and also the pressure will be transmitted to the peripheral organs, leading to hepatic congestion, peripheral edema, ascites, and there might be pleural effusion as well. Now I would like to again warn you that all of these symptoms might occur if there has been a left ventricular failure, but it occurs at a very early stage. In right ventricular failure, and in right ventricular failure all these symptoms will manifest early. However, in left ventricular failure these symptoms might occur as well, but they will occur at a very late stage. Usually the patient will present at the onset of pulmonary edema. And over here, since we brought up the topic of peripheral edema, we need to know what are the differential diagnoses of peripheral edema. So the first we have discussed, that is cardiac failure. Now there might be venous insufficiency, or there might be liver cirrhosis, nephrotic syndrome, there might be protein losing enteropathy. All of this which might cause the features of ascites and peripheral edema. It might often lead to pleural effusion as well, which will lead to dyspnea, and the patient will often present in the same way to the emergency department. Fludrocortisone therapy and NSAIDs may also cause the same features, and increased capillary permeability due to nifedipine and amlodipine may also cause peripheral edema. Sometimes it is idiopathic, and this idiopathic form is more commonly seen in women, and there might be chronic lymphatic obstruction as well. So this is the spectrum of peripheral edema. Now before we delve into the treatment of acute decompensated heart failure, we need to learn what are the complications? So, the first complication, and which is very important, that is renal failure. Now, renal failure might occur due to renal artery stenosis or due to renal hypoperfusion. Next is hypokalemia. Hypokalemia, well, you can all hazard a guess that it might be caused due to the drug therapy we will be giving for the heart failure, and most commonly it is associated with diuretic therapy. Also, due to hepatic congestion, there might be impaired aldosterone metabolism. Now, this impaired aldosterone metabolism will lead to secondary hyperaldosteronism, which will again cause hypokalemia. Now, what are the causes of hypokalemia? Hypokalemia is more commonly caused by the RAS inhibitors which we give. Next is hyponatremia. Hyponatremia may be caused again due to drug therapy, or it may be caused due to the vasopressin, which will lead to extracellular fluid expansion, leading to hyponatremia. Next, there might be impaired liver function, and obviously it will be due to the hepatic venous congestion. There might be thromboembolism. There might be onset of atrial and ventricular arrhythmias, and finally the very grave concern, that is sudden cardiac death. So now let's jump into the therapy. When a patient presents to the emergency department with heart failure and there is dyspnea, our first priority is to relieve the patient of the acute pulmonary edema. So we will give diuretics, and the diuretic of choice is Lasix or furosemide. We give it 100 milligrams immediately, and we can give a maximum of 360 milligrams. Also, if there is peripheral edema, we also give diuretics. We will give glyceryl trinitrate as an adjunct. We'll give it as 3 to 6 milligrams and as an IV, or we'll give it as an IV infusion, starting with 5 micrograms per minute and gradually uptitrating it to 10 and finally 20 micrograms. If we clinically assess that there is incidence of mitral regurgitation or atrial regurgitation, we have to give IV nitroprusside to immediately relieve the afterload. And over here, GTN, glycerin trinitrate, is given because it's a vasodilator and it will reduce the air hunger in the patient. I'm sure all of you know what is the mechanism of action of glyceryl trinitrate. It will increase the cyclic GMP levels and cause vascular spoon muscle relaxation, leading to vasodilatation. Now, here comes the specific therapies. If on echo we observe that there is a reduced ejection fraction, we need to temporarily give pharmacological therapy to maintain perfusion till we can do a ECMO. ECMO is extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. So we give dobutamine as a first line drug. Dopamine can be given if there is heart failure with oliguria, and if these fail, we may have to start milrinone, that is a phosphodiesterase 3 inhibitor. If the patient has succumbed to a cardiogenic shock, we will also have to start with norepinephrine. And finally, in this portion, I would also like to discuss a few novel drugs which have come up in the recent years. The first one is omecamtiv mecarbil. Now, I told you that one of the main complications of the compensatory mechanisms in case of heart failure is that it will increase cardiac output but at the cost of myocardial oxygen demand. Omecamtiv mecarbil is a myosin activator that acts in such a way that it will increase cardiac output without increasing the myocardial oxygen demand. Istaroxime will inhibit sodium potassium ATPase pump and will stimulate the calcium ATPase pump. So again, both of these will actually fall into the class of ionotropes. Levosimendan will also fall into the class of ionotropes, and it acts by inhibiting the phosphodiesterase 3 inhibitors, and it also sensitizes the myocardium to calcium, and it opens potassium channels. Now, sinaciguat is actually a guanylate cyclase inhibitor which will increase the cyclic GMP levels. Serelaxin is a relaxin analog which also will cause vasodilatation. And finally, nesritide. As such, in all the therapeutic regimens, there hasn't yet been a proposal to include nesritide in the treatment of heart failure, but however, it holds great promise, being a BNP analog. Now, what happens? What is the mechanism of action of BNP? BNP will cause natriuresis in response to increased extracellular fluid volume, and this will decrease the preload and facilitate and decrease the symptoms and the distress of the patient. So here is a very quick and concise review of the treatment of heart failure. I hope you found it interesting. Thank you.